Welcome to Williams College. It's great to have a chance to say hello to everyone. My name's Mandel. I'm the president here. I know I had the chance to meet some of you in August when you dropped off your students when it was sunny and hot. Things have deteriorated a little bit, but I hope you're having a wonderful visit to campus, and it's great to see you here. I'm introducing myself and Marlene Sandstrom, the dean of the college. We're each just going to give a couple of minutes of remarks, and then we're going to open the floor to your questions and hear what's on your minds as well. I did want to begin first just by saying this is, I know, a challenging day. I don't know if anybody here is from Pittsburgh, but the news out in the world is pretty bleak today, and it feels sort of inexplicable and also very problematic to start a public event like this without recognizing that. I actually was born in Pittsburgh a long time ago, and my heart goes out to the folks there. So I just wanted to acknowledge that before we get going. I am going to spend a couple of minutes just talking a little bit about my experiences since I've shown up on campus, because in some ways I'm a first-year student myself. I only got here a couple of weeks before those of you who have first-year students. And actually, could I see from a show of hands how many of you are parents of first-year students? Okay, yeah, that's what I figured. Okay, so like me, you're just entering, and your children are just entering. I'm also, as some of you may remember from remarks I made in the summer, very empathetic because my own son is himself a first-year student at another institution, and I just attended their family weekend last weekend. So I sat there and listened to somebody I know pretty well, actually, but because it was my former institution, talking a little bit about the experience. So I know very well what you're all going through and some of the questions that might be on your mind, because they were on my mind. What is my son learning? Is he learning something? And has it been a powerful experience for him? Is he taking care of himself? And how is he doing that? Is he taking advantage of all the numerous opportunities that are available to him? And of course, most importantly, does he miss me? These were the things that were on my mind. I'm happy to report his experience is going well. I hope the experience for your own children is going equally well. But I do just want to talk a little bit about some of the things that I've seen in my first weeks and months here that have made me very excited for the experience that our students are going through, and I hope is proving true for yours as well. Upon arriving, one of the first things I started to do was to get to know faculty here, and then slowly but surely, I also, once the students started to arrive, starting to get to know them. And I've been doing this in all kinds of ways. With the faculty, I've been meeting one-on-one with the directors and program leaders for all of the different departments. And with the students, I've been trying to get as close to their experience as I can. So I've been having lunch twice a month in the dining halls. In fact, Marlene and I have done that together a couple of times, and just had informal lunches with whoever is willing to sit down and talk to us, which turns out to be a lot of people. It's been really fun. And just asking them about their experiences. I've had some open office hours, which students don't need appointments. They can just drop in to let me know what's going on, or if they have things on their mind, which is also great. And we've done quite a number of events at the house, including an event that at the very beginning of the year that welcomed all the first-year students over for breakfast. And I was very impressed on that day that even though it was early in the morning, several hundred students showed up for a sticky bun. No, that's not what they're called. Honey buns? Honey bun. Yes, a honey bun. And conversation with me and my husband and some of the deans and senior leaders here. So that was a great experience. And through that, I've really had the opportunity to start to get to know Williams students. And so one of the most important things I wanted to say to you is I just wanted to thank you for raising such tremendous children, because I've had such a wonderful time getting to know them. They're so smart and inquisitive, curious, funny, good dancers and singers, and just like ready to jump in and do things and try things. And that's been really wonderful to see, and really a pleasure for me. And I'm really excited that they have each other to go through this experience with. And that's really been wonderful. The other thing that really struck me, not surprising at all because of the reputation of Williams, but I wanted to sort of reassure you from my vantage point the extent to which I have seen the faculty-student bond play out at this school. So in my conversations with faculty, as many of you know, and I know you saw and have heard us talk many times here about the 7-to-1 student to faculty ratio and the rich ways in which students and faculty interact with each other here. But one of the things I was really struck by when I did my listening tour with faculty leaders in departments across the summer was the extent to which they spoke about how important that was from their side, how enriching it was to work with Williams students, how significantly they value the relationships and the partnerships that evolve. Sometimes it's real partnerships, research partnerships with students, and how privileged they feel to teach at this college. And that was really exciting. And now I've started, as I talk more and more to undergraduates, to see it from the other side and to hear about students' encounters in small classrooms with other students, but also with the faculty mentors with whom they have started to get to know and with whom they're interacting. And if you can help us, one of the things that I would really ask you to do is encourage your children to the extent possible to take advantage of that even more than they already do, to go to open office hours, to ask questions in class and participate in discussion, and to do their part, because all relationships are two-way streets, to do their part in fostering the relationships that can emerge through those one-on-one options that exist at this school. It is really unparalleled in the sense of the size of the school, the commitment of the faculty to do it, and so when students take advantage of that, really wonderful opportunities can come from that kind of engagement. And sometimes when they're first-year students, they're a little nervous about that. Some of you may have heard me say in August that, and I said to them publicly, because they'll often say, well, what do I talk to a faculty person about? That person's famous or kind of scary. They know so much. I don't know what to say. And I always say, just go there open office hours and ask that faculty person how they became a chemist, why they study history. Because a really important lesson to learn is that everybody loves to talk about themselves. So if you go and ask the faculty person how they ended up in that particular role, or make a comment about the cute picture of their kids on the desk, or whatever it is, soon you'll be having what we call a conversation. And that's very helpful and a great way to engage with faculty if your student doesn't know how to get a conversation started. So please urge them to do that. And of course, all of this is happening in the wonderful setting of Williams College, which today is a little bleak and drippy, but is a really beautiful space and place for these relationships to evolve. And I don't want to actually underestimate, I think, the significance of the location for nurturing the experience of students while they're here and for taking advantage of all this place has to offer. What I want to do, though, is reflect on what I think it is that comes out of these relationships and what my real hopes are for the liberal arts experience and education in which your students are engaged. And I think for many parents who have opted to send their students to a small liberal arts college, there's already an understanding that the liberal arts is a good thing, that this is something that we value and that we're hoping to promote. But I did want to just talk a little bit about what is so powerful about a liberal arts education here at Williams, and what I think your students are walking away with over time and will happen over time. And I particularly want to do this because sometimes I get questions about, well, I'm looking at the 32 courses that my student has taken over the last 4 years, and it looks a little bit like a mishmash to me. I don't quite we don't teach Western Civ in the way we used to anymore. The requirements are pretty loose. There's a lot of flexibility, and there are 32 courses, and they're all interesting, but what does it add up to? And I sometimes even have alum who will say that about their own experience. So what is it about those 32 courses, and does it matter what you take, and how are we extracting meaning and value out of this experience? And here's my profound belief about the power of this education, and which I'm hoping to share with you, and actually hope that you will share as well in conversations with your student here. So to my mind, the way a liberal arts education works and why it works is because when students come to campus, they look at the smorgasbord of human knowledge, which is in essence what a curriculum is. All the things that we have come to know and learn in our world, our society, our science, the arts, social science. And they see things they're curious about and interested in. We used to say in higher ed a lot, students come to college to pursue their passions. But actually, I think at 18, 19, 20 years old, they don't so much know what their passions are yet. Maybe if they're lucky, they'll figure that out while they're here. But some of us are probably still trying to figure out what our passions are even later in life. But they do know that they're curious about something. They're interested in something. Something catches their attention. A history course on pirates, an art history course on Asian art. There's just something that catches their attention and they're curious about. And because it's interesting to them and they start to study it and the content intrigues them, they dig in deeper. And while they dig into this thing they're interested and curious in, they start to master a set of transferable skills, which they started learning when they were very young and will continue learning after they graduate, but in this intensive way, which is really the privilege of a liberal arts education, 4 years just to focus on getting better on those transferable skills through study things you're interested in. So what are those things? They're writing, problem solving, data analysis, research, public speaking, these core skills that they'll need no matter what they do. And I can't think of a profession where you don't need to know how to do research, where you don't know how to write, where you don't need to know how to write, where you don't need to know how to solve problems. And so they get better at those while they're studying in these wonderful courses, the content of which actually they probably will forget. And I won't do this in this audience, but often I will say publicly, I'll ask somebody to tell me 3 things they learned in their, sophomore biology class. And often people will say, did I take sophomore biology? I don't even know if I took that class, much less what I learned. The content is often goes away, but what comes with the content is those skills that then they will take on. They may or may not go on to be biologists, but they will go on to use the skills about problem solving and analyzing that data and doing that research wherever they go. And that's what's happening here, and I think it's particularly powerful here because of these small class settings where students can ask questions, engage directly with the experts, where there aren't graduate students mediating that relationship, and where faculty experts can teach students how to think about evidence and ask questions on the way. The other thing we do in a liberal arts education that's really important is we ask students to think about both breadth and depth. So we ask them to think about studying across all of the 3 major divisions of the way most colleges and universities organize human knowledge, the humanities, the social sciences, and the sciences. So we ask them to study across that, but then we also ask them to major. And majoring is a beginning of getting a little bit of depth in a topic. And one of the things I've come to think about majoring is it's actually not really depth, right? Because 8 or 9 classes is not going to allow you to be an expert in something. So what does the depth of the major give to you? I think the depth of the major introduces you to what it takes to be an expert in something. And if there's one thing that I hope all college students take away from the experience of learning in an environment like this is how much you need to know to really be an expert in something, to have an opinion about that thing, to analyze the sources of evidence and think about what it would take to really know. And that's why I think a lot of professors will say, I hope my students come out of my class with more questions than answers. Because, in fact, it is learning some humility about what it takes to know something and how we know what we know as a society that comes from this liberal arts education. And I hope, again, gives them a kind of sense of what it will mean for them later as they go on to become experts in whatever domain they become experts in, what that takes, what kind of work that really takes to do that. And so this is sort of the model of liberal arts that I think Williams does particularly well. I hope you're starting to see it. I will say in semester 1, week, 7, we're not there yet. It's just a little bit of sort of swimming in the sea of midterms and getting to know people and wondering if you took the right classes. But it's a cumulative experience that over the 4 years will, all going well, take your child forward in that adventure of lifelong learning in which this is such a significant and important chapter. A word about what I think is, I see that as sort of the broad power of a liberal arts education over time, but I wanted to spend just a minute talking about what I think is the relatively new directions of the liberal arts and at Williams now, in which students are being exposed to things that are a bit different than when I guess I can collectively say we went to college because I think we're all about the same age here. So, and here I would focus on a couple of areas where Williams is building and where that I hope your students will take advantage of. The first is in the arena of experiential learning. So increasingly colleges, and Williams is doing this through both the Center for Learning and Action and also through the research programs that exist in the summer, are increasingly encouraging students to think about bridging the gap between thinking and doing, between theory and practice, between the things you learn in the classroom and the kinds of things you learn when you roll up your sleeves and try to put those theories to a test out in the community somewhere or in a laboratory. Those are powerful lessons, not only in, again, what it takes to be an expert in something and where and raising questions about where knowledge lies, where you can find out information, but frankly, they're also really powerful lessons in how hard it is to actually enact a theory. So if you learn about something in a classroom and then you go to try to apply it somewhere, you can see how really challenging that can be. And so increasingly encouraging students to do that kind of an experiential engagement is one of the things I think we're increasingly committing ourselves to. Another area in which I think colleges have really changed is the sense that we always used to say that students learned as much outside of the classroom as inside the classroom, and I think that's still true. But we're thinking increasingly with increasing depth about the importance of shaping that co-curricular experience, of how to think about the time that isn't in class, and where one of the things I think that's notable about Williams, we of course have a long tradition of winter study that happens in January, but increasingly also thinking about summer internships and how to use the kind of the experimental learning that happens outside of the classroom and in summers as part of the college experience. So having a robust career exploration center, which gets students to begin to think about what they might do, not for the rest of their lives, actually, because career exploration, much like trying to decide what you're going to major in, is usually a twisted road. I'll play one game I do like to play with audiences. How many of you are doing something professionally directly linked to what you studied in college? Okay, that's pretty good. It's about half. Actually, it's more than I usually get. How many of you are doing something directly linked to your first job? So you can see a lot of you aren't, right? And you know why that is. What I learned from my first job was that I absolutely did not want to do my first job. And that is often one of the most powerful things that happens. And so internships become a time for students to explore in the same way they're trying to decide, wow, I thought I was pre-med, but actually I want to be a philosophy major. And so that's the same kind of exploration, and the summer is really important. And the reason I'm stressing that here is it's vitally important to encourage all of our students to go to the Career Exploration Center in their first year. I think one of the mistakes students sometimes make is they show up senior year and say, okay, now I want a job. Open your drawer of jobs and give me a job. But that's actually not how it works. The Career Exploration Center has no jobs. There are no jobs in drawers. And that can be very disappointing for a student. But they're very good at helping students think about what their strengths and weaknesses are, helping them think about how to network, how to build a resume, and how to engage in that exploration process that is built into the name of the center. So those wraparound sort of the year as a whole, not just 2 semesters, I think is increasingly something that we are all thinking about. And then the last piece I wanted to mention about how I think liberal arts is different now than back in the day, and you hear this a lot in, I would say, the public discourse around higher education now, is the focus on diversity in our student bodies. And I want to mention it here because I think it's important to say that the goal of introducing students to people who are different from themselves, defined in any number of ways, and one can think of that as a global or regional or economic or ethnic or religious, and all kinds of ways people are different, gender, has become a value of institutions. It's one that Williams holds deeply, precisely because we know they're going to go out into the world and need to interact with people who are different from themselves, and that doing that better than their predecessors have done is one of the core skills that a school like this can offer. And so that is a conscientious part of the learning goals of the institution, to get students to think about what it means to talk across difference and engage with each other. And that can be challenging. And you know, all schools sometimes struggle with how to make it work for everybody. But I think students will often tell you that it's among the most powerful things they learned outside the classroom, is how to collaborate with a broad group of diverse people across difference and talk about those differences and think about them. So that is a third way that I think our institutions have really evolved over the last 20 to 30 years. Last thing, now moving away from that, I just wanted to give a word of advice to parents in this process. Again, I come from a deeply empathetic space when it comes to thinking about how to let go. I'm not going to talk about that part, but I did want to just say a couple of things that I hope you'll be encouraging your children to do while they're here. I already mentioned one, which was not to leave any individual semester without building a relationship with at least one faculty person, to build an advising team out of those faculty. That will evolve over time, but to have them conscientiously working on from their side, building those relationships. And if it doesn't work with one faculty person, it will work with another. So to just work on that. Secondly, of course, to take care of themselves. I know you don't need me to tell your children that, and I will tell you, my son totally ignores me every time I tell him this, but taking care of themselves by sleeping and exercising and eating well and the kinds of things that I see sometimes that they lose track of, any help from parents and family in those arenas is really important. And lastly, I would love it if you could encourage them to take intellectual risks and to be curious and to explore their interests in the way I was describing. You can't make a mistake in college. There is all of those transferable skills I was talking about, you learn no matter what you study. You can study economics, you can study computer science, you can study philosophy, you can study art history, you can study English, you can study history. Whatever you study, you're going to learn those transferable skills that I talked about, and Williams students are going to do really well out in the world with those skills. And so I really encourage you to encourage them to take those intellectual risks, because the more they're interested in what they're learning, the more they're going to take out of their classroom experience. So on that note, I'm going to end my remarks and turn the floor over to Dean Sandstrom, who I'm a historian by discipline. She's a psychologist. I think between the two of us, we have some important bases covered in understanding our students, and I want to turn the floor over to her.
Thank you. Can folks hear me? Yeah. Well, I'm so happy to see so many parents here today. I'm the dean of the college and a faculty member in the psychology department. I came here just about 20 years ago. It'll be 20 years in August. And the moment that I knew that I had chosen the right place to be happened very, very early on. It was in August, before my very first semester got started, and I was sitting in my office in Bronfman Science Center, which is in the process of being rebuilt. So it's actually a blank space right now. And I arrived and my office furniture was not there. So I was sitting on the floor of my office, and there was a telephone on the floor and a computer, a desktop computer sitting on the floor, and I was sitting there. My door was open. and a student saw the door open and walked into my office and put his backpack on the floor and sat down on the floor, and we started having a conversation. And that is really the ethos of the place. Faculty members keep their office doors open most of the time, and students know that when the door is open, it's an invitation for students to come in. And I went to larger universities for my undergraduate and graduate work where that wasn't the case, and it really is a quintessential part of the Williams experience. So I thought I'd just talk about a few of the big issues that I see students facing during their first fall on campus. The first piece has to do with where we are right now in the academic year, which is in the thick of it. You've probably already heard from your sons and daughters about midterms and papers, and that things are getting going. Have folks heard about that from your students? I see nods. It is the moment now. It happened really, I would say, about a week ago in sort of a gentle wave where the great exploration of ideas turns into the production of work. So papers and exams and kind of pen to paper, fingers to keyboard. And some students are really excited about that, and others are really nervous, and some are in between or both. And for those of you who were here during move-in day, and I actually recognize some faces from move-in day, I'm just going to remind you about something I said back then, which is that if your students are talking about feeling overwhelmed or uncertain or worried about the workload or whether or not they belong here, that is a really normal response. Many students feel that way during the first part of the first semester at Williams. And it is a really good time for them to remember that there are a lot of folks on campus who are eager to sit down and talk to them about how they're feeling, both to normalize it and to help them feel that they are on the right track. And primary among those people are the faculty members that Maud was talking about. The faculty members here at Williams chose this place to be because, like me, I think, they really wanted to be at a place where undergraduates were the center of everything. The research and scholarship expectations at Williams are high, so folks who are here really had a choice between being at a place like Williams or at a big research institution. And the reason they came here is because they really love spending time and working closely with undergraduates. And this is the time of year when faculty members are often getting in touch with the deans in my office and saying that they really would love to be able to sit down and talk with students who seem like they're struggling a little bit, and they're trying to reach out to students and make sure that they know that they're open and accessible for those conversations. So if you have the opportunity to encourage your students to take advantage of the opportunity to sit down and talk to faculty, that would be a really great thing to do. I think there is a way in which, for many students, that feels hard. For many, really most of the students who are here, they are here because they've been incredibly successful at everything that they do in all dimensions. And often students struggle with the idea that they're feeling a little worried or overwhelmed. That feels new and it feels different. And on top of feeling a little worried or overwhelmed, they also feel disappointed in themselves for feeling that way or worried that they're somehow going to let their faculty members down. And they say things like, well, yeah, I probably should talk to my professor, but let me just wait until I feel like I have a better grasp on this material. Or let me just wait until I can go in there and, put my best face on and feel my most competent and confident self. And of course, that leads them to sort of avoid the very thing that could actually help them feel much more comfortable and confident at this point. So it's really a fabulous thing for students to take advantage of working with faculty. coming to their office hours, answering that email, and I'm just going to pause to say that students don't read their emails and faculty still correspond with students that way. So another great piece of advice is to tell your students to check their email at least twice a day. It really has become an ancient, old-fashioned mode of communication, I think. And the students don't use it to communicate with each other. They have all kinds of other platforms and things they use, and I'm not going to name any because if I do, students would laugh. It would be some old thing that nobody uses anymore. But that's the way that faculty do reach out to students by and large. So responding to that email, office hours, just making an appointment to come and talk about their work, something that they've been thinking about or struggling with would really be a great thing to do. I want to also say something about the first bump. Some of your students have maybe already talked about the first bump. I say first because college and life are full of bumps. And so the first bump at this point is often an exam that didn't go as well as a student might have hoped, or a paper that has lots and lots of suggestions in the margins for things to think about for the next assignment. I think that it is really important for students to know that that first bump, whatever it is not a good predictor at this point at all of what they should or shouldn't pursue moving forward. I really can't think of anything that could have happened in the first 6 weeks on this campus that should be dictating to students at this point what they're good at or what they're meant to pursue or not meant to pursue. The bumps are bad predictor, but they're really a great opportunity for students to begin to figure out how to manage moments of challenge. And that's the way that I talk to students about it. It's just a good way for them to think about how they can begin to use resources on campus, of which we have so many interlocking sources of support for students, whether it be the writing workshop, or the Math Science Resource Center, or talking to a faculty member. I think that students come to Williams and they participate in our First Days Orientation program, and it's like a tidal wave of information about all those resources. And it's kind of hard before you know what it is going to be like in a class or to have that first bump. It's hard to know in the abstract how those resources might be useful to you. But when you have the first bump, it's a reminder, or can be, and should be, well, okay, so this is a moment where I might think about what kind of resources would be helpful to me. And so reconnecting students with the idea of making use of those resources, the idea that this is what strong students do to stay strong and get stronger here on campus is a really important thing to do at this point. And when we talk to seniors, one of the things they say, if we ask, what's the one thing you wish you knew as your first year self, they say, I wish that I started taking advantage of some of those resources earlier. And we would love for students to take advantage of them now. The second brief thing I wanted to mention has to do with looking forward. At the same time that students are just beginning to settle in here on campus and begin to figure out what their work habits are going to be like and how they like to study and where they like to study, and they're just beginning to get a fuller sense of this place, they're also already thinking ahead to next semester. And believe it or not, next week, they will be sitting down with their faculty advisors to begin selecting their set of courses for the spring. They may have already mentioned that to you or talked a little bit about the things they're thinking about or puzzling over. And it is a really great opportunity for them to ask themselves, what have I learned about myself as a student here just in the first 6 weeks that I've been here that may help guide some of my decision making about my next set of courses. Students often talk about worrying that they don't yet know what their big plan is or what they want to do at Williams, and they feel a little frozen in making their decisions because they feel like they should be slotting into some larger plan. And no first-year student needs to have a large plan. They don't need to have a major picked out at this point. In fact, this is the best time to be exploring really broadly throughout their first year into their second year. They really should be taking advantage of the whole breadth of the curriculum. So the faculty advisors that'll meet with your sons and daughters are going to hopefully ask them a series of questions that will help guide their choices. And I'm going to share some of the questions they're likely to ask with you because they're great conversations for you to have if you are talking to them about the kinds of courses that they're thinking about taking. So one question is, what have they enjoyed most so far in the set of classes that they're taking now? Is it the hands-on opportunities and observational skills and the use of technology in a biology class that's been incredibly exciting? Or is it small group work in a political science class? Or is it a language that is opening up all kinds of new ways of thinking for them? Thinking about what it is that is really, really enjoyable to them right now. What surprised them the most so far about their experience here? What did they find in their classes that they didn't necessarily expect to find? That's another way to help guide them into what they might want to think about sampling in this next semester. It's a really great time for students to continue to take courses in areas that they already know that they're interested in. It's also a really great time for them to begin thinking about things that they're interested in, that they're curious about, as Maud was talking about, but that they don't necessarily play to the strengths that they already know they have. Because one of the most remarkable things that happens is that students realize through taking courses that they had strengths that they never would have known about until they had the chance to exercise that muscle. So asking them to think a little bit about what they're curious about. And then what skills are they hoping to build is another great question to ask, whether it's their writing skills, their quantitative skills, and a skill that I'm particularly passionate about that Maud mentioned, which is finding your voice, being able to think about and express your thoughts in ways that connect with other people. And it's interesting, if you look at our course catalog, you'll see that our courses have certain designations. So certain classes are writing intensive, and they're designated with a W, which means that they're meant to provide skill building in writing, which means that there'll be an iterative process with a lot of writing and drafts and comments and feedback in order to help students become better writers. We have a quantitative designation, a Q, for courses that focus on quantitative skills. What we don't have in our catalog is a finding your voice designation, and I think that's because it's really throughout our curriculum in many, many of our classes. But one of the things that we value at Williams is the ability for students to figure out how can they talk about their ideas and how can they express themselves in ways that really do connect with other people. And one of the fabulous things about an institution that has the faculty-student ratio that we do and the large number of small classes is that in a small class, that will happen. The small classes are structured so that you can't really be a spectator. You can't sit in the back. There is no back. And the faculty member and the other students in the class create a structure that really helps students learn how to find their voice. So another question to ask is, what is the size of the classes you've been taking? And have you been taking mostly big classes? Have you thought at all about taking a smaller course? Some students are really eager to talk about their ideas and they seek out those opportunities. Others less eager, so helping students mix that up a little bit and make sure that they're getting the opportunity in a smaller course to get to practice expressing themselves would be a great thing to do. The last thing I wanted to touch on, so we talked a little bit about where students are now, what they're going to be thinking about in terms of next semester. The last issue I wanted to touch on that is on students' mind at this time in the semester as a first-year student has to do with relationships and the kinds of friendships and relationships that they're building on campus. And you may be hearing from your sons and daughters that they haven't made a best friend yet or they haven't found somebody who reminds them of their closest friends at home, which is hard and also incredibly normal because, of course, the close friends they had from home are friends that they've likely had for many, many years starting in childhood. And I think it's important to think about the way friendships develop in college. It's different in a lot of ways than the way they develop in early childhood and in middle school. Children tend to develop friends based on shared experiences. They grow up in the same neighborhood, they're in the same school, they go to the same synagogue or church, they're in the same after-school activities, and so that common experience and common background provides a really easy frame for making friends. But here, one of the remarkable things that happens is that students build relationships based less on common background and more on the exciting new things that they're trying out together here. And Maud talked about the fact that this is an incredibly diverse and intentionally diverse community, so your students are interacting with folks that come from backgrounds that are likely very different from theirs in all kinds of different ways. Those kinds of friendships that you're making with folks with very different backgrounds based on new experiences that you're having here are not as automatic or instant as childhood friendships are when they start. It takes longer, it takes a bit of an investment. And so just reminding folks, they haven't been here that long, it's okay. If they haven't yet felt like they've made those really strong connections, those will come. And the skills they're learning to build those relationships and the relationships themselves are going to last long beyond Williams. It's just an incredibly rich place to build and then nurture friendships.
Thank you.
Sure.
So we're going to open the floor to questions from you, and we will repeat the question because we don't have a roving mic. So we'll be able to hear you, but then we'll repeat the question for folks in the audience so that everyone can hear what you're asking. And any question's fine. It doesn't have to be something we addressed in these remarks. So if there's something that you're interested in talking about, that'd be great. Yes?
You gave us 3 pieces of advice during move-in day when you talked to the parents. They were to listen intently, be astonished, and tell people about it.
Oh, that was me.
I think that was her. Yes.
Could you go back to that again and sort of discuss that one more time?
Sure, I'm glad you reminded me about that. I agree with myself that those are 3
Excellent
really
advice.
Good pieces of advice. You know, listening to other people and being open to hearing about the whole breadth of experience, different people's perspectives, how they think about things, what their life was like before they came here, how a piece of literature or a film or a piece of music, how they experience it. Listening is, I think, one of the core ways that we learn. So being open to listening, not just to your faculty members, but to the entire world around you. Tell about it has to do with finding your voice. Sharing what you know, what you hear, what you've learned, sharing it with other people. We've got a really strong model here of peer mentorship, peer tutoring. And one of the things we know is that when students explain what they've learned to another student, that the student that they're helping learns a great deal, but the student who's providing that tutoring learns even more. Being able to explain something so that somebody else can understand it is an incredible learning tool. And then be astonished. There's so much that students are going to experience, and if they stretch outside their comfort zone, which is what we hope they'll do, take a course that they don't know exactly what it's going to be like or whether or not they'll be good at it, if they kind of let that go and stretch themselves, there's so much to be astonished about.
Thank you. Is there another question? We always say all students have questions. Yes?
So, do you have advice about getting somebody to be curious and take a risk, and they're willing to do that, but they're concerned that it will influence their other courses.
Can I ask, influence in the sense that they might have to work hard at something and then it will erode their ability to be successful in the other course? Okay, so the question was, how can you on the one hand encourage a student to be curious and take risks, while on the other simultaneously reassure them that it's not going to erode their ability to be successful in their other courses? So I'll say something about that, and then I think the Dean of the College can speak to that very well as well. One great mechanism we have here for encouraging exploration is a fairly new option to take a course pass-fail. And sometimes students think that they shouldn't do that because they've come from schools where you never could do that, and it seems like maybe it won't look good on your transcript. That is just empirically not true. There is no, employers actually don't really look at grades. This is something I tell students all the time and they don't believe me, but in fact they don't really look at grades. They look at whether you graduated or not. That's really what employers care, and then some specific skills they might be looking for. But also a handful of pass-fail courses can't possibly get in the way of, even if I were wrong about that, of a larger profile of an academic profile. And the thing about pass-fail courses, what they do is they remove the pressure so that a student can just learn, just be curious, and not be so worried about, boy, you know, I really, so without outing who she is, my mother's actually in the room. And when I was in college, she told me that all educated people needed to take an economics class. I went to a school with no distribution requirements, and one of the reasons I picked it was so I would never have to take another math class as long as I lived. But I always listened to my mom. Sorry, Mom. So I always listened to my mom. So I did what she said, and she was right, but I took the class pass-fail because I was terrified of it. But I learned so much because I wasn't worrying about that first midterm and the inevitably low grade that I was going to get on it. It wasn't as bad as I feared, but you know, it wasn't my best moment either, right? Because I was doing something that was challenging for me. And so that is one mechanism we have for really encouraging and allow that. And I would urge students to take full advantage of that. And many, many are, actually. I'm happy to say this was a bit of an experiment at Williams, but many students are taking advantage of that and using the full allotment that they have available to them for that. Do you want to add anything to that?
I agree that pass-fail is exploration's best friend. We remind students of that all the time. The only thing I would add is that sometimes it's helpful for students who are nervous about taking a risk to hear that advice from their peers. I'm a parent, and as Maud said, my kids don't always think that my advice is on target, but if students talk to their peers, their junior advisors, and ask them, well, have you taken a course that you were interested in but that you were really nervous about? I think hearing their peers' responses to that could be really helpful.
There's some questions in the back there, yeah.
Yeah, somebody recently shared an article with me about not double majoring because kids are doing it now to make their, I don't know, resumes look better for potential employers, which seems so weird to me. Yeah. And I just wondered, do you have an opinion about double majoring? Because I always thought it was just follow what you love.
Yeah, thanks for that question. It was just in the New York Times, I believe, a couple of days ago. And fascinating. Yeah, so actually at Williams, our students not only double major, they triple major, they take concentrations. There's a lot of depth as well as breadth here. As to my own opinion about it, I share your bias to a certain extent. I will qualify the point of view in a moment. But I think the idea, again, there's often a race to double major in the belief that it's somehow going to be helpful upon graduation for what comes next. It's not. I mean, again, except in very specific areas. You can think of certain things. So if you want to get a PhD in something, majoring it is helpful. You don't have to major in it to get a PhD, but then you're probably going to have to do something else afterwards to show that you have particular interest in that area. There are a few other professions where that matters, but by and large, it doesn't matter. And the downside of double majoring, of course, is you pile up your requirements. So then you don't have as much room for the breadth part. And the breadth part, of course, is where you can take those risks and explore things you've never heard of and really take advantage of what a college curriculum is, which is the breadth of human knowledge. We can't teach everything, but we teach a whole lot, right? So and that's how you take advantage of it. So my preference is that students don't double major, and particularly if they're double majoring for what I would consider the wrong reason, which is that kind of pre-professional, misplaced actually, pre-professional focus. On the other hand, there are sometimes good reasons to double concentrate or double major. One of them would be you sincerely have really deep interest in two very different areas. And that's when I'm sometimes less worried. And that actually does happen here quite a bit. So somebody will major on the one hand in biology, but in the other hand in, classics. And in that case, I'm a little less nervous about it because honestly, I think then, if you go back to what I was saying a major is, understanding what an expert is in both of those areas is so different, and what the kind of skills it takes and the way it opens up your mind, then it's maybe not as troubling. I'm more troubled when I see two things that are sort of similar, and that really uses up all of your excess time. How about you, Marlene? Any other thoughts on that?
I completely agree with that. My advice to students is that if double majoring is great if they really want to take every single course in that second major. If those courses really speak to them, then go ahead. But if they're taking courses just to check off a box, that rarely seems productive. I just talked to a student this past week who is interested in the privatization of space travel, which I thought was phenomenal. Hadn't really thought about that. And he's majoring in astronomy and economics, and that makes a lot of sense for him with this very interesting particular interest he has. But when I hear students say that they're majoring in economics and English is the major that they love, and economics is the one that's the practical skills, that I'm less excited about, because a student can major in English and then still take a core set of classes in economics. It would be very clear to an employer that they have taken that block of classes. So this is something that we talk about with students. I will say the trend is to double major. Something close to 50% of our students do.
Thank you. Another question, yes.
Thank you for the reassurance that many of the kids at this point are very anxious. The question I have is, when do you pull the trigger from a parental perspective that, okay, this is not normal anxiety, this is beyond normal anxiety? And if you feel that way, other than encouraging your student to seek help, is there anything else that you would want us to do?
Sure. So the question was that while it's true that many students are feeling anxious because this is a big transition in their lives, how do you know the difference between that normal anxiety and the kind of anxiety that really seems worrisome and perhaps is associated with, really not being able to function very well? And what should you do if you have that concern? Your parents and your sons and daughters better than anybody else. And if you're worried that you're hearing from your student that they're really not taking care of themselves, they're not eating and sleeping, they're not going to class, they really don't sound like themselves, they don't sound like they're in a position where they can take advantage of the opportunities that we're providing, the first step is to talk to them about coming to the dean's office. The dean's office is really a great first door to go into, because the deans will sit down and talk to the students about all kinds of things, ranging from how things are going with their academics, how things are going with their roommates, with their entry, with their team, with their extracurriculars, and then can help funnel them into a particular set of supports that would be most helpful to them. So the first step is to suggest that to your son or daughter, that they come and they talk to somebody in the dean's office. If they really seem resistant to that, you can always pick up the phone and call the dean's office and and let us know that you're really worried. And we can reach out to the student. We would then need to let them know that you had done that, because it would be strange for us to suddenly get in touch with your son or daughter and not explain why we were getting in touch. So we would let them know that we heard from you, but that would be a way that we could make sure that we were laying eyes on the student to make sure they're okay. And in an emergency situation of any kind, remember that you can always call campus safety. Campus safety is not just for folks on campus. Parents can use it too. There have been occasions where students have contacted their parents and it's clear to the parents that the student is experiencing some kind of emergency. A parent can always call campus safety 24/7, and we're able to to get help for students that way.
Thank you. Is there another question we can take? Please.
Your advice, to get sleep, exercise, and eat well. Is there any discussions going on right now of focus and funds toward any broader healthy eating options as far as fresh fruit, vegetables, salad options, or anything along those lines?
Okay, so the question was, in efforts to encourage students to take care of themselves, how does the messaging go in the dining halls, and what are the options available for students to do that if they're being encouraged to? So one of the things that's sort of famous about college, you may remember from your own college days, is it's kind of a smorgasbord, right? After all of those years of healthy eating at home, directed by your parents, suddenly you come to a place where all the choices are your own. And actually, I think students do better now in that space than we all did in our space, but it is a challenging moment sometimes. The dining halls here do provide a rich array. And I can say this with an incredible amount of certainty because I have now worked my way through all of the dining halls and I have never had an unhealthy meal. So it is possible to eat well and really well, actually, in the Williams dining halls, but you also have to make good choices. And we do talk to students all the time in lots of ways about making good choices in all areas of their life. We probably have even less of a direct impact in some ways than you do, in the sense of their willingness to listen. But the dining halls do programming on this. There is, good advice to students, and there are a lot of good options for healthy eating if they want to take advantage of them. Do you have anything to add? Thank you. Yes, please. I think this is the last question. Yeah, go ahead.
A centralized place for students to find out about summer research opportunities.
So the question was, is there a centralized place for students to find out about summer research opportunities?
So yes and no. I can talk about the various summer experiences that students seek out. So a good number of students opt to stay on campus for the summer, and we have a pretty vibrant group of students on campus who are actively doing research or scholarship. Something like 200, 250 students are on campus every summer. That piece is not centralized. Students would talk to a faculty member whose area of research interests them and ask them what kinds of summer opportunities are available. So those kinds of opportunities are decentralized within departments, but there are many, many opportunities. There are other places to go for advice about summer opportunities. The Center for Career Exploration is one of them. They sponsor a lot of summer internship opportunities, some locally and others all over the country. Also, the fellowship office is a great place to go. We sponsor a wide variety of summer fellowships. Again, some of them in this country, many of them abroad. And then the Center for Learning and Action is another place to go to get advice about various kinds of experiential learning opportunities for the summer.
And I might just piggyback a broader point on that, which is particularly for first-year students. One of the things I think we see a lot in the college population here, but across the country increasingly, is a level of stress that they're carrying. And this goes to the earlier question that I think also wasn't so true when many of us were in college. And sometimes that plays itself out in the realm of what we very officially call FOMO, fear of missing out. This idea that everybody else has a great opportunity, a summer opportunity, and I haven't found mine yet. And actually, parents, and I put myself in this category, are not actually sometimes helpful partners in that, because we also urge them on very much. What do you mean you haven't gotten your internship yet? My friend's kid has an internship. Have you gone there? And as important as I was talking about taking advantage of resources over the summer, trying things out, going to the Career Exploration Center and doing those things, I would also, I think, sort of qualify that advice in one way, particularly in this first summer. Nothing bad will happen if they don't have that perfect summer internship this summer. It's okay if they come home and are lifeguards. That's okay, and sometimes that's what they really need in the first summer, just to see their old friends and be with their parents or their grandparents or their favorite godparent or whoever it is that they get sustenance from. And really nothing bad will happen. That broad point about taking advantage of the summer and of research opportunities is really a global one for the 4 years. But also just to kind of reassure you that nothing's happened, that nothing's gone wrong if that doesn't happen in the first summer that they've gone to college. So thank you. I think we're out of time. Do I have time for one more, Rob? One more, okay.
You spoke about how vital you feel diversity is on campus. Thank you for that. But can you spend a few minutes talking about how you vet, which students are allowed access maybe to the students, and you're thinking around who is there and who may not make the cut?
Okay, thanks for the question. So the question is about speakers on campus and how do we decide who is invited, and is there some way to filter out people who are invited? And this, of course, is a hot button issue across the country at the moment. You can barely get through a week of reading the newspaper without finding that some campus is struggling with this. And one of the things I always say when I talk about this issue is that thinking people disagree about what the right answer is for any given space. As educators, I think the Williams faculty deeply believe in the importance of exposing students to as broad a range of ideas as possible and to ensuring that they have access to speakers. Typically, the way we decide who's going to be invited to campus is that somebody on campus wants to invite them. I mean, that would be so there is somebody here, so nobody just launches onto campus. So there's some group or professor or set of individuals who is sponsoring somebody and wants to invite them in. And then there's a process for how that happens. But I think the most important, we spend less time thinking about who we're not going to invite. In fact, I think we want to have robust debates and conversations from a wide range of people. But a lot of time thinking about time, place, and manner. What is the best way to have that person? And if they're a highly controversial person, what are the structures we want to put in place around it so that students who might feel uncomfortable in front of a certain set of ideas feel that they can challenge those ideas? And I think actually all of us, including at Williams, have to do more work on preparing our students to learn the skills, to engage deeply in ways that would actually demolish the argument of somebody they disagree with. And I really hope that over my time here, we can continue to think about creating programs that will allow them to do that, because that will empower them in the face of the most, insofar as they encounter offensive ideas, the most offensive ideas of how to deconstruct and take on those arguments. So thank you. So I think that's all the time we have for now, but thank you all for coming. I hope the rest of your visit is wonderful.